Can a heart truly fall for someone if love was never part of the plan? What if your wedding day wasn't the beginning of a dream, but the end of your freedom? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Could you ever love someone who was assigned to your life? Do you believe love can be forced? Or does it only bloom in freedom? It was a cold, overcast morning in the quiet outskirts of Asheville, where rain whispered secrets on the rooftops and a young woman's heart battled silent storms. In a quiet farmhouse in North Carolina, rain whispered on the rooftop while Emily stood frozen in front of a cracked mirror. Her eyes swollen with silent battles, her breath caught between duty and despair. Today she would marry not for love, but for survival. In the dim living room of an old countryside house, a young woman stared at her reflection in a cracked mirror. Emily, 22, had tear-filled eyes and a tight knot in her chest. She wore a plain white dress, sewn together in a rush. That day she wasn't getting married out of love, but because of an agreement between families. Across town, Daniel, a serious 29-year-old, was nervously tying his tie. He barely knew Emily. They'd exchanged only a few awkward words during stiff formal meetings arranged by their parents. But now their paths were bound. Not by romance but by necessity. A forced marriage meant to save her family's land and rescue his family's struggling business. As the chapel slowly filled with curious guests, these two strangers walked toward the altar with hesitant steps. Neither of them knew they were about to start a journey that would change everything. What began as a contract would soon evolve into something far deeper. Would you stay in a loveless marriage, just to save someone else's dream? Let us know in the comments. Your story could resonate more than you think. And don't miss what happens when the lights go out on your wedding night. Emily grew up on a small farm inherited by her father, an honest but stubborn man who always believed he could handle things on his own. But the truth was, debts had piled up over the years and the bank had already come knocking. Their last hope came in the form of an unexpected proposal: marriage to the son of a powerful family of agricultural tycoons, the Whitmores. And so, under the weight of vows neither heart was ready to bear, two strangers stepped into a future neither had chosen. But in the silence of that first night, could something unexpected begin to blossom? Do you believe that love can grow where there was only duty? Or is the absence of choice the death of all passion? Tell us in the comments. Your story might be the mirror someone needs. And don't miss the next chapter, when silence turns to sparks, and one moment shatters everything they thought they knew about each other. Subscribe, like, and stay with us because this isn't just a story about marriage. It's about what happens when two hearts, lost in obligation, begin to choose each other. She never dreamed of white veils or flower aisles. Her dream was a university classroom, not a chapel aisle. But when duty knocked on the door, love had no room left to breathe. Her plan was to study veterinary medicine and escape the life of duty that surrounded her. But when she saw the defeated look on her father's face, and heard her mother's silent sobbing from the next room, she realized there was no choice. It was either marry or lose everything. On the other side, Daniel wasn't much better off. Despite the polished image of wealth, his family was full of hidden cracks. His father, controlling and cold, saw Daniel as nothing more than a chess piece. To him, emotions were weaknesses. Business always came first. You're marrying the Amherst daughter. End of discussion. It's that or bankruptcy. Daniel said nothing. He simply stared at a photo of his late mother and wondered what she would have said about all this. He had long since learned to swallow his own desires. But deep down he still longed for something different. Real love. A life with meaning. The week before the wedding they met just once. It was a stiff, awkward lunch. Emily wore a pale blue dress and avoided eye contact. Daniel tried to be polite, but his cold demeanor came off as almost cruel. This man will never love me, she thought, and maybe I'll never forgive my father for this. But fate has a way of playing its games, quiet and ironic, because sometimes the deepest bonds are born from the absence of choice. Now tell me, have you ever had to give up something important for someone you love? Drop your story in the comments. You never know who you might inspire. The church bell rang with a cold, hollow echo. Guests whispered among themselves, unsure if they were there to celebrate or just to satisfy their curiosity. Emily walked in slowly, her simple dress contrasted sharply with the elegance of the place. She looked ahead and saw Daniel, serious, still like a statue. No smiles. No soft music. Just a ritual, almost a farewell to freedom. As she approached the altar, Emily hesitated for a second. He thought about running out the door and never looking back again. But then she saw her mother, clutching a rosary tightly, her eyes shining with tears. That hurt more than any duty. Emily took a deep breath and took a step forward. Do you promise to love and respect each other until death do you part? Silence. Second. Yes, he said first bluntly. Yes, she repeated, her voice trembling. The kiss was mechanical. A quick brush of lips followed by lukewarm applause. As they left, everyone wanted to get a closer look at the couple who had sealed a deal, not a romance. But behind their serene faces, each carried a storm. Two strangers emerged from a chapel, not as husband and wife, but as silent hostages of an agreement signed in desperation. However, neither of them knew that this was the beginning of something that destiny had written in silence. Night fell quickly. The moon, high above, seemed to watch with quiet pity what would happen next. In the guest house room arranged by Daniel's parents, the air was thick. They had barely spoken during the ride. He opened the door and let Emily in first. A king-sized bed waited, covered in white flowers and pristine sheets. A cruel gesture considering the emptiness between them. Emily went to the bathroom, splashed water on her face and stared into the mirror. You're strong. You'll get through this. When she came out, he was sitting on the edge of the bed, eyes fixed on the floor. You can take the left side. I'll sleep on the couch, he said, finally breaking the silence. She didn't reply. Just nodded and lay down. The room sank into darkness, broken only by the distant sound of crickets. And there, in the silence of their first night, a small spark of respect was born. There was no love. Not yet. But something more precious had taken root. The decision not to hurt each other, even when Everett, would you stay or run away if your heart was on the line? Hing else screamed for distance. The days following the wedding felt like a winter that refused to leave. Their coexistence was cold, conversations limited to good morning and excuse me. Daniel left early every day to handle negotiations for the new family partnership. Emily, isolated at the farmhouse, buried herself in the books she still dreamed of using in college. A hope nearly buried. But it was only a matter of time before their silent distance cracked. One Friday afternoon, Emily was making coffee in the kitchen when she heard heavy footsteps enter. It was Daniel, more tense than usual. He slammed a stack of papers onto the table and said sharply, "You can't keep spending like nothing's changed. This isn't a hotel. It's a responsibility." Emily froze. She turned slowly, eyes wide with disbelief. "Spending? I bought groceries for the house. We live here, remember? Or would you rather I move into a rooming house downtown?" He stepped closer, irritated but measured. "You don't get it. Every unplanned expense adds pressure to the deal with my father. I can't afford to mess this up. Oh, of course. Because Mr. Perfect can't get his hands dirty. Too bad, Daniel. I've been neck-deep in mud ever since they told me, you're getting married to save the family." A heavy silence filled the room. They stared at each other. Two wounded strangers trying to recognize themselves in the other's reflection. Then with a choked voice she added, "You think you're the only one who suffered because of this?" Those words hit deep. For the first time he noticed the pain in her eyes. A different kind of pain than his, but just as real. The spoiled girl he'd imagined in his mind began to fade. That night, Emily slept facing the wall, eyes open, replaying every word. Daniel lay on the sofa, staring at the ceiling, wondering how many times his pride had blinded him to the obvious. She was just as trapped as he was. And maybe even more alone. Have you ever argued with someone you loved, only to realize later that you were both fighting for the same thing? Share your story in the comments. Sometimes the first clash is the beginning of healing. The morning after their argument, the farm was wrapped in a heavy silence. Not even the roosters dared to crow early. Emily woke before sunrise, her eyes still heavy from a restless night. She moved quietly across the wooden floor and made her way to the stables, her sanctuary since childhood. She needed air. A bit of peace. A place to remember who she was before all of this. As she fed the horses, she felt someone approaching. She turned, surprised. It was Daniel, sleeves rolled up, a bucket in his hand. He looked different. Less tense. His posture softer. "I didn't know you came out here this early," he said quietly. Emily raised an eyebrow. I didn't know you even knew where the stables were. They laughed. For the first time. It was a quiet, brief laugh. But real. A first thread of connection. In silence, Daniel began helping with the animals. They cleaned the troughs, swept the floor. And by late morning they were sitting side by side on the porch, sipping black coffee from old mugs. You really like this, don't you? He asked, staring out at the fields. More than I like people, she replied honestly. He smiled. And then, as if releasing a weight from his chest, he said, I never had the guts to tell my father I hated working with him. I just did whatever he said. I've never actually chosen anything in my life. Emily looked at him. For the first time she saw a real man, not the obedient son, not the cold businessman. She saw someone just as broken as she was. Maybe that's something we have in common, she said softly. That night they didn't sleep on opposite sides. They didn't share a bed yet, but they sat on the couch together, watched an old movie in silence, sharing a blanket. And when their fingers brushed by accident, neither of them pulled away. It was just a gesture. Simple. But in that moment, a new chapter quietly began. What was once silence became routine. And what had been obligation began to feel like fate. In the days that followed that innocent touch on the couch, small gestures began to appear. Emily noticed how Daniel started spending more time at the stables. He brought her coffee without a word. Sometimes he just watched her from a distance, quietly admiring the way she handled the animals, with patience, with soul. Daniel in turn caught himself smiling more often, laughing at her offhand comments. And the things that once irritated him, her independence, her strong will, now intrigued him. He wanted to understand them. Understand her. One rainy afternoon the power went out. The entire farm was plunged into darkness. With thunder rumbling in the distance and the sky fading to gray, Emily appeared in the doorway holding a lit candle and asked, Do you know how to play dominoes? Daniel chuckled. Only how to lose. Perfect. So do I. We can call it a draw. They sat on the floor, candlelight flickering around them as if the outside world had simply stopped. Laughter grew louder with every round, until a gust nearly snuffed out the flame. In the dimness their eyes met. And in that second everything changed. No words. Just a look. One that saw past the titles, past the arrangement. Two souls finally recognizing each other. That night he asked, Do you miss your freedom? Emily thought for a moment, then answered honestly, Yes. But for the first time, I don't feel alone. Those words echoed in Daniel's mind like a soft whisper. For the first time in a long while he fell asleep with a light heart. And when he woke up he rushed to help her with whatever she needed, just to see her smile again. Sometimes, love doesn't arrive with grand gestures. It shows up in a warm cup of coffee left on the table. In a hand steadying a heavy bucket. In a glance that lingers just a second longer than it should. Her heart felt lighter with each passing day. Daniel was no longer a stranger, he was becoming part of her world. There was something in the way he listened, the way he watched her, that slowly began to fill the quiet spaces in her chest. But everything changed when the kitchen phone rang. Emily answered with the calm voice of someone at peace. But on the other end, a bomb. Miss Emily? This is the city hospital. Your father has suffered a heart attack. He's in critical condition. The world spun. Within minutes, Daniel was beside her in the car, driving fast. No questions, just action. At the hospital, Emily saw her father intubated, pale, surrounded by machines. The image of the proud, strong man who once pushed her to the altar now looked fragile, almost childlike. She cried. For the first time in ages she cried without holding back. And Daniel, without thinking, held her. A long firm embrace. Not out of duty, but out of shared pain. Out of something real. But the real shock came in the hospital hallway. A man appeared, well-dressed, hair perfectly styled, and walked toward her with a careful smile. Emily, it's been a while. I didn't think I'd ever see you again. It was Andrew. Her ex. The only man she'd truly loved before the marriage. The one she once thought would wait for her, but never showed up when she needed him most. Daniel looked at him, then at Emily. The tension hit instantly. Andrew went on. I heard about the wedding. Arranged, right? It's not too late to undo it. I'm here now. Emily was stunned. Part of her froze, another part wanted to scream. But before she could respond, Daniel took her hand. firmly, with quiet resolve. In that moment she understood. Love isn't about who arrived first. It's about who stayed when everything fell apart. That night, Emily remained at the hospital. Daniel returned to the farm alone, but not without leaving a note tucked in the pocket of her coat. If you want to go back to him, I'll understand. But if you decide to stay, I'll be here. This time by choice. The night at the hospital was long. Emily sat by her father's bedside, watching the slow rhythm of the machines. Behind that aged face were so many stories, so many mistakes, and still love. Twisted, quiet, but undeniably there. As she ran her fingers across the rough blanket, Daniel's face came to mind, the way he rushed her to the hospital. The way he held her, said nothing, just stayed. And then, inevitably, Andrew, the man she once believed she loved. The one who promised to stay, but vanished when things got hard. That morning, as she stepped into the cafeteria for a cup of coffee, she saw him again. Emily, you didn't answer me yesterday. We could try again. I know there's still something between us. She looked at him for a long moment. Yes, there was still a part of her that ached with the memory. But now it felt different. It wasn't longing anymore. It was just the past. You disappeared when my world was falling apart, Andrew. But you know what hurt the most? It wasn't that you left. It was the silence. And you know what healed me? Daniel's silence. Because he stayed. Andrew lowered his gaze. He knew it was over. Emily returned to the farm that evening, exhausted. The house was quiet. On the table, a simple dinner, made by him. No note. No words. She stepped into the living room. There was Daniel reading a book, glasses slipping down his nose. You came back, he said, eyes still on the page. She smiled. And replied, yes. Because now I get to choose. And I choose to stay. The silence that followed was broken by a hug. This time there was no hesitation. No doubt. It was the beginning of something neither dared to name, but that already existed. Emily had made her choice. And deep down her heart had known the way, ever since that first touch on the couch. Have you ever had to close one door to truly open another? Tell us in the comments, what did you have to leave behind, to finally find yourself? The days that followed felt like a breath of fresh air after being underwater for too long. For the first time since the wedding, Emily and Daniel woke up exchanging smiles that didn't feel forced. He made a point of preparing breakfast. She made a point of putting sugar in his coffee, even though he preferred it black, just to hear his playful complaints. On the farm everything seemed lighter. Emily returned to caring for the animals with joy, and Daniel, who once helped out of obligation, now made a point of learning. They laughed together, messed up together, and came home with mud on their boots and warmth in their chests. One afternoon, as Emily sat on the porch mending a torn shirt of Daniel's, he walked up behind her and said softly, "You realize we've never actually had a honeymoon?" She laughed. "I think we're living one now. Except instead of beaches we have mud. And instead of a hotel, we have a chicken coop. I like it better this way." It was the first time he'd said it with such certainty. And she believed him. That same night, under a sky full of stars, he led her to a quiet field far from the farmhouse. He spread out a blanket on the grass and pulled a small box from his pocket. But it wasn't a ring. It was a simple silver band with a modest stone. A symbol. A gesture. "This is our new beginning. You don't owe me anything. If you want to leave tomorrow, I'll understand. But if you stay, stay because you choose to." She looked into his eyes. And for a moment there was no contract, no pressure, no past. "I already stayed, Daniel. Well, I just want to grow with you." And there, beneath the stars, they kissed like everything before had only been rehearsal. It was love, still uncertain, still learning, but real. The mood was peaceful. For the first time the house felt like a home. Emily and Daniel had begun planning a small veterinary clinic behind the farm, blending her passion with his investment. Their days were filled with work, laughter, and dreams. But life, as always, has a way of testing healing hearts the moment they begin to trust again. The news hit like lightning in the middle of the afternoon. Daniel received a call from the family firm's headquarters in Chicago. The lawyer's voice was tight. "Your father is selling the land in your name, including the farm. He's claiming breach of contract. He says you fell in love, and that wasn't part of the deal." Emily heard the call from the kitchen. She froze, breathless. Her blood ran cold. "He wants to take everything from us," Because we're happy? She asked, stunned. Daniel was in shock. He believes that love weakens, that feelings get in the way of business, and that if I stay with you, I'll be betraying the family. I hate that I can't just say no to my father. Her voice cracked, her eyes distant. Emily, maybe it's time you said yes to yourself. Then, as if driven by the instinct of someone who's been hurt too many times, Emily stood up. Then go. Save the farm. Save whatever it takes. I won't be the reason you lose everything, Daniel. He stared at her, stunned. Are you sending me away? I'm giving you the freedom no one has ever given me. Go. Fight for them. I'll find a way. Her words hurt her more than they hurt him. But deep down she believed that true love doesn't imprison, and if he were truly hers he would come back. That night, Daniel packed his bags in silence. Before he left, he placed an envelope on the table, the deed to part of the land now in Emily's name. Alone she opened it and found a letter inside. I know what I'm doing. But if this storm takes everything, let it. Just don't let it take you. D. Do you believe it's worth risking everything for love, even if it means losing what took a lifetime to build? Tell us in the comments. How far would you go for someone you love? 3 months had passed since Daniel left. Autumn had settled over the farm, painting everything in golden tones and a silence that screamed. Emily kept going the best she could, caring for the animals, keeping the house running, and managing the small makeshift clinic, now treating neighbors' animals for free. On the outside she looked strong, but inside, there was a space no one else could fill. Every morning she opened the mailbox with a flicker of hope. No letters. No calls. Until one Monday morning, as she stepped outside to feed the calves, she saw something at the gate. A bouquet of sunflowers. The flowers she had mentioned only once to Daniel, saying they were her favorite. Tied to the stems, a key to the house. And behind the fence, standing there, road-worn, dusty, eyes-tired and hair a mess, was him. Daniel. Is there still room for me in there? He asked, placing his hand over his heart. She didn't answer. She walked up to him, eyes brimming but heart steady. And then, without thinking, she wrapped her arms around him. Tight. As if no time had passed. As if the world outside was just distant noise. I thought I'd never see you again, she whispered. I tried to move on. Did everything my father wanted. But every meeting, every night in Chicago, I kept thinking about one thing. I left the love of my life in the middle of nowhere with a silver ring and a promise. He took a deep breath and pulled a paper from his pocket. The contract dissolving the agreement with his family. He had given up everything. The company, the inheritance, the status. Emily, now more confident, resumed her studies online. Daniel, even with little, began supporting small local farmers. It felt like everything they'd gone through, the forced marriage, the fights, the hard choices, had shaped them into exactly who they were meant to be. And on a quiet Sunday morning she woke up to find an envelope on the kitchen table. Inside was a note written in his handwriting. Would you marry me, again? But this time just for love. She burst out laughing, tears in her eyes, and ran outside. She found Daniel in the field, kneeling beside Hope the cow, who mooed in confusion. In his hand was a small silver ring, this time set with a ruby. Yes. 1,000 times yes, she said. The past had brought them together by force. But it was the present, and the courage to love, that kept them there. Do you believe in second chances? Do you believe something beautiful can be built, even after all the pain? They didn't start with butterflies. There was no spark at first glance, no destiny-written moment. In truth, they began in silence, strangers bound by a contract, surrounded by pressure and followed by shadows from the past. Emily and Daniel never meant to fall in love. In fact, they resisted it. She looked at him and saw a cage. He looked at her and saw a complication. They were both half-broken people just trying to survive the weight of expectations. But love, real love, has a strange way of choosing the most unexpected places to grow. It didn't come in grand gestures. It wasn't loud. It came in quiet mornings, in coffee cups left on the table. In muddy boots left by the door after a long day in the fields. In silent glances that said, I see you. They fought. They pulled away. They questioned everything. But they also stayed. Daniel wasn't a prince. He was a man learning to feel after years of being told that emotions were a weakness. Emily wasn't a damsel. She was a woman learning to trust after being taught that love came with a price. And together they unlearned what life had forced into them. Their love was born in the cracks, in the quiet pain of choosing each other over and over, even when it would have been easier to walk away. They weren't perfect. They weren't always kind. But they were honest. And they were willing. Daniel gave up a life of status for a life of truth. Emily let go of fear and made room for something real. And what they found wasn't magic. It was something better. Belonging. They built a home not with bricks but with forgiveness, patience and laughter. They didn't promise forever. They promised today. And then tomorrow. And the next day. One breath, one fight, one kiss at a time. So when Daniel knelt in the field beside their cow named Hope, with dirt on his hands and a new silver ring in his palm, it wasn't a fairy tale ending. It was the next page in a story they were writing together. Full of flaws, full of history but undeniably full of heart. And when Emily said yes again, not because she had to, but because she wanted to, it wasn't the start of something new. It was the confirmation of everything they had built in the fire. So tell me, do you believe that love can grow in unlikely places? That sometimes the best kind of love isn't the one that saves you, but the one that stays? Share your story in the comments. Because maybe your storm is the beginning of someone else's miracle. And if this story moved you, like it, share it and subscribe. Because someone out there still needs to believe that love can be messy, imperfect and still the most beautiful thing in the world. Their love was born in the cracks, in the quiet pain of choosing each other over and over, even when it would have been easier to walk away. They weren't perfect. They weren't always kind. But they were honest. And they were willing. Daniel gave up a life of status for a life of truth. Emily let go of fear and made room for something real. And what they found wasn't magic. It was something better. Belonging. They built a home not with bricks but with forgiveness, patience and laughter. They didn't promise forever. They promised today. And then tomorrow. And the next day. One breath, one fight, one kiss at a time. So when Daniel knelt in the field beside their cow named Hope, with dirt on his hands and a new silver ring in his palm, it wasn't a fairy tale ending. It was the next page in a story they were writing together. Full of flaws, full of history but undeniably full of heart. And when Emily said yes again, not because she had to, but because she wanted to, it wasn't the start of something new. It was the confirmation of everything they had built in the fire. So tell me, do you believe that love can grow in unlikely places? That sometimes the best kind of love isn't the one that saves you, but the one that stays? Share your story in the comments. Because maybe your storm is the beginning of someone else's miracle. And if this story moved you, like it, share it and subscribe. Because someone out there still needs to believe that love can be messy, imperfect and still the most beautiful thing in the world.